Hello there, this is Mark Malecki. I'm your instructor for Sumi-e, and I wanted to do an introductory lecture on the basic materials that beginning students are going to need for their first Sumi-e class. Sumi-e uses materials that are slightly different than you might use in a Western watercolor class, and therefore I will do a little bit of an explanation for you today. The first thing that you're going to need when you set up is a cloth that you put underneath the paper. Sumi-e paper is absorbent and water will come back up from the surface of the table or whatever surface you're working on and go back into the Sumi-e paper. Therefore, you need a cloth underneath it that will prevent that. So what you have to do is find a cloth that is a felt cloth. You can buy these at the school supply store. We have them, but if you can't get there, you want to use a Sumi-e cloth. You can obtain those from various art supply stores that are Sumi-e art supply stores, or you can get them at Joann's Fabric. If you're going to go to the fabric store, make sure that you're not getting felt that has polyester in it. You do not want one of these to be made out of man-made fabrics because the man-made fabrics defeat the purpose. So you want genuine wool felt. Fortunately, they last for decades, so you'll spend a little bit more money on it, but you'll have it for a long time. As far as black, white, or gray, those are the colors to get. Some people like to work on black, some people like to work on white, some people like to work on gray. But I don't advise a bright color like a green or a red, because when you're painting, the paper becomes translucent and some of those bright colors will come back in to your field of view and perhaps throw you off. But white or black will work. Gray may work the best because it's a tone that's neutral, but any of them will work. And in fact, you can try, as time goes on, each of them and see which one you like best. The next thing that you're going to need is a water container. Sumi-e uses water as the vehicle, and so you're going to need a water container. At the school supply store, we sell a bowl that looks like this. It's got 3 different wells to put clean water, and then the water, as you use it, you'll want to keep 1 or 2 of the wells with fresh, clean water and use the other well to rinse your brush, because periodically you have to rinse your brush to change colors or recharge. Therefore, you have to make a point of dipping in the well that's got the ink mixed in already and clean the brush. Then you put the brush into the clean water and you've recharged with a clean brush. So that's an important thing. Now, this particular container is something that's available, but if you don't have that, you can just use 3 separate jars. And so if you want to bring jars, or even they sometimes have them at the school to just fill them up with water, just keep in mind that you have to have separate clean water and dirty water wells, and so something like this works for that. The next thing that we have to talk about is the paper. The paper that we're going to be using is called rice paper, but it's actually not made out of rice. It's made out of various other plants. And the paper that we use comes in rolls, such as this, or it comes in pads, such as this. You'll see pads or rolls at the supply store. We have rolls, but sometimes when you go to art supply stores, you'll see these pads. That's all okay to use. So if you're using the pad, you don't do what you do in maybe a class where you've got a notebook. Instead, you have to take the paper out of the pad before you start, because the paper is thin enough that whatever is put on this sheet of paper will penetrate into lower layers. So if you're going to use a pad, take the paper out of the pad. if you're going to use a roll, what you do is you cut a piece of the paper off, and you can even take some water and draw a line like so, and when you've drawn the line, the paper will separate very easily. So you will work with a sheet of paper about this size. There are smaller pads and smaller rolls than this, but I would get at least an 8-inch width roll of paper. So that's what you need to bring with you. The next thing to talk a little bit about is the ink itself. The ink itself comes in 2 different forms. One of the things that we have is an ink stick with a ink stone. This is called in the Japanese language a suzuri, and this is called an ink stick, but it's also called sumi, which is ink in Japanese. So when you are making ink with an ink stick and a suzuri, you put water on the ink stone, and then you rub the ink stone or the ink stick on the stone, and after 40, 50, or 60 rotations, the ink becomes thicker. You keep doing that until you've made enough ink for the session. It takes a little bit of time to do it, but a lot of people kind of like to do it because it calms them down and gets them ready for painting. So that's a nice thing to do. Occasionally, though, you're going to want to work faster. Maybe you don't have time to rub all that ink and make it. And in such case, they do sell bottles of bottled ink. Don't buy something called India ink. Don't use any kind of a ink that's intended for use of pens. You want the kind of ink that is intended for use for Sumi-e, such as this. This one's called traditional Chinese ink. They have a variety of them. They come in these bottles, and it's very thick. So when you use this bottled ink, you have to add a little bit of water to the ink, a drop or two of water. Otherwise, the ink is too thick to apply very easily to the paper. So if you're going to use the bottled ink, make sure you've got some kind of a little water dropper to dilute the ink. In terms of water droppers, you can go to a resale store or something like that and find an old sugar spoon like this. You want something small like that, an eyedropper works. Or if you want something that's more fancy, you can get these little water droppers on various websites that deal with people that are working in Sumi-e. This is kind of a fun one. It's made out of copper, and I use it. But a regular sugar spoon is fine too. The next thing that you should have, bring with you an old plate. It could be a saucer. I found at World Market a while back a sushi plate. Something like this is good. Now, if you don't want to carry around something heavy, you can use a plastic plate instead. But the porcelain's maybe a little better. So if you've got the strength to lift it, bring an old plate. And the reason for that is when you have ink on your brush, you're going to periodically want to test the ink, and the place to do that is on the plate. So bring a little plate or saucer with you as well. It can be some used white porcelain plate that you find at a resale store, or something that you're no longer using in your kitchen. The next thing to talk about is the brush. The brush that we're going to use initially is a brush that looks like this. This is called Orchid Bamboo Brush. Orchid Bamboo Brush has got hairs that are fairly coarse because they come from deer pelts, and as a result, the hair is springy. It takes a pretty good amount of water, but it's good for doing things with clear, crisp structure, and so it's a good initial brush for you to have in your collection. If you take care of your orchid bamboo brush, it will last for decades. And what you need to do when you initially get it is it's going to come in a plastic with a plastic cover over the hairs, and you're going to take that plastic off, and then you're not going to keep that plastic. It's thrown out. And what you have is you've got the hairs there, and you'll feel them, and they'll be very hard. The brush won't move at all. That's because there is sizing in it, and the sizing is keeping the brush hairs stiff for their protection. But you do not want to paint like that. So prior to your first painting session, find some water, put the brush in the water, and soak the brush for 5 minutes or so, and then slowly work the tip of the brush off. Keep rinsing until the sizing is gone and the hairs are pliant. So that's what you want to do. So that is how to get ready to paint. In Sumi-e, there are 2 positions to use the brush. You might as well think about them right away. And the 2 positions are the vertical position and the horizontal position. Sometimes we paint horizontally, sometimes we paint vertically. We hold the brush in the middle point, and we work from the shoulder. So when I'm doing a vertical brush stroke, I'm painting with my hand. My hand is on about the middle part of the brush, and I've got the point down facing the paper, and I am using my whole arm to make the marks. Sometimes we're going to use the brush on its side, and when we do the side position, we're going to be painting on the side. We do not do, as they do in Western style, use a pencil type grip such as this. That's not something we're going to be doing in this class. There's a tendency, I suppose, to want to do it that way, but that's not how it's done. So we are painting with one hand, and we're going from the shoulder. We're approaching it from the middle point. We've got our thumb on one side, and we've got our 2 fingers on the other side. These 2 fingers can float. Some people use the ring finger also to bolster the great finger, but the little finger is kind of just like when you politely paint, when you politely drink tea, the little finger is loose. So anyway, you're ready to paint when you're doing this. Anyway, this gives you the basics for what you need to have ready for your first class. When we get to the first class, I will also have an additional lecture on certain other things that are nice to have in your collection as you proceed, such as other kinds of brushes that have different effects, maybe brush rests, and you might also want to have sets of colors and things like that. We'll be talking about all of that, but for now, for the basics, we need our ink stick, our ink stone, our bottled ink, our plate, our paper, our brush, and our brush pot, such as this. I think I covered it all. Okay, if you've got any questions, you can call or text me at 703-820-7636, or you can post a question in the classroom. If it's a question of general interest that you think the other students will want to know, I will post replies. Anyway, thank you for your time and attention. Bye.